No matter who you drafted in the top 8 of your rookie draft this season, not talking about Superflex, week 1 is past. This is the Football Guys Dynasty Show. I'm your host, Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And I just thought of it hours ago, just recanting a lot of my thoughts and notes from Sunday/Monday, that the top 8, the big 5 running backs, the first 3 wide receivers with Judy, Lamb, and Reagor, you got to feel pretty good about all of those guys. And what's interesting is we kind of talked about the depth of this class, especially at the top. It's 1 game sample size, but we didn't have the preseason. So let us embellish a little bit about the 100% sample size being 1 game so far. But everyone had reasons for optimism in terms of playing, at least a requisite amount, probably more than you would expect for a lot of rookies. And despite, whatever their offensive team dynamic was or their depth chart, is that they showed something. They showed something either opportunity-wise or skill level-wise that gives reasons for optimism, not only just big picture for their career, but also at some point during this year to varying degrees.
Yeah, it's a big week, and honestly, we're moving quickly. And one of the things that we've looked at in data wise and past experience wise is, especially round 2 running backs, by midseason into the later part of the season, that's the trajectory. DeAndre Swift already leading the team in snaps. So that's, again, it's a plurality situation. He doesn't have 50%. I think it was 40, 41, something like that. But he had the most. You see Marlon Mack get injured. So he is fully launched into Jonathan Taylor's fully launched into running back 1 status. That doesn't even, we haven't even gotten to Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who's obviously in an upper tier at being as a first round running back and 25 touches, no receiving game work, 1 target of note. So we'll see how that comes around. But Dobbins gets in the end zone, and Akers is working in there with Malcolm Brown. I think there's positive trajectories going on with these guys, and it's early, but I think the positive, first week positive signs, and these situations could be coming to these rookies quicker than we might have thought. With the slow rookie start narratives, there's positive signs that these situations could be moving in their way more quickly than we anticipated.
Yeah, and with some of these injuries at wide receiver, notably, I mean, I was going to be in a spot or two that, starting Jalen Reagor in week 1, Jerry Jeudy feels like, we didn't get if Courtland Sutton is fully healthy kind of look, and how does that look? But Jeudy made some plays. He also had a couple drops, but again, the involvement factor of, if you need a wide receiver 3, a flex, you feel pretty good about that. I mean, the level of Dallas's offense, I know it didn't come on the scoreboard in terms of total points, but you saw that level of, you're not really going to be scared off of Michael Gallup. What would his stat line look like without the OPI near the end of the game? CD Lamb was projected, I saw at Football Guys, he was projected to be in that wide receiver 3 and flex conversation, despite, the crowded depth chart moniker. And then, Jalen Reagor, again, he got behind the defense like 3 times. And only one of them did he see an accurate pass from Carson Wentz. How would we, the general community, be reacting, and how much drumbeat would there be with Reagor if he had connected on a second one and he was open to actually go for the touchdown in that instance, to where he's over 100 yards, even if it's a couple catches, and he has a long touchdown, 2 highlight plays in his first game. So there's a lot of this, and Cam Akers got 15 plus touches. Malcolm Brown, I know, is a big waiver wire. You have to have a take on him right now in redraft and in a number of dynasties. But, Cam Akers as a rookie got that amount of share, and then Darrell Henderson go sit over there, right? I mean, he's in the backseat of the bus, clearly behind the other 2. So there's a lot of, and J.K. Dobbins taking goal line, and Mark Ingram saying, I know it was we'll see in a closer game with Baltimore, but that to me was notable, that Mark Ingram, you figure, get part of a season, let's see how this Dobbins kids develop. If this turns into a 2 or 3 headed committee and Ingram is not the number 1 of that, he may be rendered closer to lineup irrelevant, or like a dart throw flex. What now? week 3. I mean, it really could be that quick, right?
Yeah, I mean, this could trend. I'd be surprised if that happens, but we'll that's something definitely to watch for. You feel less comfortable starting him this week, for example, than you were last week, just because of what the trajectory we've already seen. So again, it's positive news for Dobbins, but I think it's important to keep in mind that it wasn't big time volume, right? I mean, it's only it was only 7 touches, right? So he did score twice, but it was 7 touches and 22 yards. So the fantasy day looks pretty nice, but I think it's important to keep in mind that the volume hasn't really, it's not. Ingram still had. He still had 10 touches, right? So it's not like it's fully over. It just happens to be that Dobbins got both the scores. But if Ingram is not going to get the goal line, that's a pretty big concern for his stat line.
Because we had questions about him as a receiver, going through his big year last year. It was a lot of it was volume, and the team was great, and he got a lot of touchdowns as opposed to 50 plus receptions. So if Dobbins is going to take some of that, one thing I did notice though is all of a sudden Ingram looked a lot slower. Like you saw Dobbins on a few, like the burst from the backfield spot into the line of scrimmage and beyond, there was a notable difference. There weren't a lot of straightforward, straight ahead runways for 15 plus 20 plus yards, which is the thing we're kind of saying could be the biggest difference between those two. Of Dobbins could take it to the house. Ingram, it turns into 19 yards. So that could be the difference there. But man, yeah, it's gonna be fun to see those splits and see if there's any sort of, not a hot hand approach, but any sort of pattern developing over the first month of the season, which is kind of the first checkpoint. Again, we have one sample size of a game instead of, in 4 to 6 weeks, how do some of these conversations go once we get a lot more moving pieces? And Jonathan Taylor was another one that, he had here's the thing. I actually hedged. I had Taylor versus a decent number of leagues in terms of some questions, but I'm going to start one of them. And I kind of went both ways. I split it kind of down the middle, but yet, some things that we'll talk about on a weekly basis, but there was a big divide in start rate over at my fantasy league, as well as the projection. They had Jonathan Taylor at Footballguys over him in terms of projections, but Jonathan Taylor was like a 70% start rate at my fantasy league, which really surprised me. And Akers was around 50%. And I was like, wow, a healthy Marlon Mack. I mean, I know they're a big favorite over at Jacksonville. That ended up being wrong. But I think the thing that really surprised me was Jonathan Taylor, 6 targets. And that still left plenty for a strong game out of Nyheim Hines. And that's one thing I think I mentioned offhand in one of the 20 shows we've done previous to this in the offseason of saying, Phillip Rivers, and we saw Austin Eckler get 1 target, over there for the Chargers, that, man, if the targets go away or cut in half or whatever for Austin Eckler, and then they follow Phillip Rivers, where now running backs are getting 8, 10, 12 targets as a team over there with Indy. I mean, there's like this unlocked upside for Jonathan Taylor that I don't even know if we really grasped what that could be. If his receiving numbers go up like that, we were probably thinking, 30 catches, 35 catches. But what if it's 4, 5, 6 a game? Because he played a partial game and he had 6. And if Rivers is going to pepper like this, I mean, this could really unlock some things.
Yeah, I saw that that Taylor led rookies in both receptions and receiving yards. If I jokingly said on Twitter, wait, the plotting Big Ten running back ? And that's obviously tongue in cheek, but I mean, and we know Phillip Rivers has a history of this. And honestly, we go back to another Wisconsin running back who, coming out, didn't have a big receiving profile and became a receiving running back to add to what he did as a runner. Is Melvin Gordon. And so we have seen him create out of guys a receiving role for running backs that haven't previously had it. So I think it's an interesting one, and I think it's an interesting the upside's great. I mean, this could be, just think about coming into the season. You're like, yeah, like maybe you're expecting like maybe ultimately like low running back 2 type production out of him.
A split with Marlon Mack, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Naheem Hines is the third down or hurry up guy, but yeah, it gets cleared in 1 week. Like
right.
It really, and this is why we always talk about, don't overvalue or push a guy down based on situation. We say that all the time, right? I mean, because that situation can go negative and it can go positive in a play. One player in or out can make a huge difference at running back.
Yeah, totally. And so you're in week 2 and he has a starting job, right?
They might have said, what do I have? What do I have at running back? I'm not really sure. I got Taylor, I've got 2 or 3 other guys, but if you get the right roles, I mean, the right opportunities pairing up, because you always say, I mean, if you start 2 running backs, what do you need? I mean, you need 26 starts, and maybe not every single one is clarified in week 1 per se, but it's like, can you patchwork those together over the course of time? This week you might have 6 guys. Last week you had 2. I mean, it varies wildly.
Yeah, and the thing that I think the huge takeaway from Taylor is you sit here in week 2 and coming into the season, you might have said, hey, listen, like if I get a half a win out of him, like that's
where I'm not contending. I'm a building team.
Yeah.
On to 2021.
Yeah. If you're a 7-win team, right? And he's, you're projecting half a win, something like that. Now I think a win and a half is fully in the range of outcomes for him. And you sort of think about that and say, okay, this is going back to our warp stuff. And when you sort of look at that and you say, okay, well now I have to shift my expectations of my team, not from being a fringe playoff team, but to being a playoff team, and sort of how do I move that to being a contender for a bye, right? I think of the big storylines so far, I think that's really, in terms of team changing and league changing, that's a big one, because it can move. He has the ability to add a win over what you could have reasonably expected from him coming into the season in a timeshare with Mac. So I think that's a big one.
With upside from there, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
totally.
It could be more. So
totally.
Naheem Hines, I mean, what if, some of the red zone work and he had a couple touchdowns. One thing I wanted to add, I saw that, doing the next gen, sort of player tracking and mapping, of the 10 fastest ball carriers in week 1, this was before before Monday Night Football's games, but Taylor had 2 of them. Yeah, and right. The funny, because it was like a Dobbins, it was more pronounced than Dobbins, but it was weird because so Taylor comes in and you just see, like, his first one was a screen pass and it went for 30 plus yards. He nearly scored, but you just like, it's that Saquon Barkley sort of, you watch him and you're like, okay, like he moves really well. Like he got up to speed in a hurry and you just see him break angles. Like, I saw a linebacker on that screen pass, like, oh, I'll just go out and get Taylor, out here, on the perimeter. And he didn't get within 3 yards of him. Like he didn't even get one of those, passing, flailing arm things that you try to hope, graze him or whatever. He wasn't even close to do that. And he was gone. And so you just see he moves differently than a player of his size should, is what I would say. And the fact that I think one of those top runs he had, top speed, max speed, it was like on a 4-yard run.
A 5-yard run.
Yeah, that implies between
9 miles an hour.
Yeah, yeah. It implies from the backfield. That means in like a 13-yard zone or something, he got up to that speed. And it means someone stopped him from going that speed in a relatively short amount of time, which I need to go back. That's very impressive as well.
Yeah, Miles Jack made the tackle. So
another freak. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's probably only 2 guys on the field that could have gotten to those spots at those particular times, and they were the 2 that met. So
I interrupted, but you said there was another storyline or player, and I have a guess on who it is, but I want to see. I'm assuming it's a running back. But what is a potential game changing, league changing observation or developing situation, as we'll call it, from week 1?
Josh Jacobs is in a tier that. So I had him at running back 4 coming into this week. So that's the baseline that I had.
That's as high as anyone would have him, pretty much, of reasonable, optimism.
Right. I think that I had him
Too low.
the highest of anyone at Football Guys and anyone that I've seen rank him. I have a hard time going higher than that because I don't think you can put him over Barkley. I don't think you can put him over McCaffrey. I guess you could make a.
He's got a big lead on Barkley right now, though.
He does. He's got some. He has some cash in the bank there. The question that I have, and what is interesting to me is, and again, the reason that I like him so much is the 21-year-old first round running back that hits in his rookie season, as valuable as of a profile as you can find in all of Dynasty fantasy football, right? That's the platinum standard. And so that's where we were starting from. And so that's sort of where, how I came down so high on him. The question I have for you is, where does he fit with Zeke? Because I think that is maybe it's a conversation that only you and I are having, but I think it's a conversation. I'm not putting him over Zeke yet, but I think it's a conversation more than most folks that would have him later in the later in the single digits or closer to 10 aren't having. That I think it should be that conversation more than something lower than that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a conversation that's happening or is more valid to occur today than it happened, a week ago, because the two things here would be the two factors I think that we saw. Even if you still have concerns, I think they've been alleviated to at least a moderate degree. First of all, the receiving game work. Jordan's going to talk about how he has to wave his hands to get a target pass thrown his way. He didn't have to do that. I didn't notice any hand waving, up in the air like you just don't care in week one. So he didn't have to ask for the ball. He had 6 targets, robust 6 targets, 29 total touches. So check mark there. I mean, because I think I asked on some other show, what's the upside on Josh Jacobs if I told you right now he caught 60 plus balls? Mm-hmm. And I think you said what, top 3?
Top 3.
Top 3. So, just knowing how he'll probably be used outside of those high level receptions. So we're working in that direction. I mean, if he gets 80, 90, 100 targets, he's going to get there. So that means it opens up elite upside for this season. And then the other one would just be the Raiders weren't very good. Now they brought in 2 receivers in the top 100. Henry Ruggs looks like he can lift the lid, keep some safeties back. And could they just be a better team? And it looks like their defense, let's call into, I think they're one of, the 4 or 5, 6 defenses we saw in week 1 that is highly questionable. I don't think that's going to affect Josh Jacobs. It actually might help us optimization wise because he might get a few more receptions, a few more negative game scripts. But if he's going to get exclusive goal line, the offense is generally better than it was last year. Then, I mean, again, 1, 2, 3 running back overall is in play for him. So now here's what I would say. Now, Ezekiel Elliott is sort of on a different plane. So Jacobs doing whatever he does this year is part of building a profile. And so that's why you can say, well, and this is why I'm not going to, put words in your mouth, but why you said, it kind of starts at 3 and you said, well, it's really, Zeke versus Jacobs is because Barkley, he's part robot. I just picture what he would be doing. And again, it would just be too easy, I think, if it worked out where if Barkley was on a truly great team with a great offensive line, I mean, he might break records, right? I mean, this is, you see like the one time he got out on the perimeter and it's just like, oh, there goes Barkley for 40 yards. Like it literally was like he had been stuffed. Like he hadn't been able to take 3 steps up until that moment of the game. The one time he got a runway, it was just like, oh, gone. Like you're lucky he didn't score. So he's truly in a horrific situation in that regard. Now he's going to get a bunch of but so there's a tangible talent difference there. You see it. So that's why in Dynasty, you start playing, in my opinion, this would be like reindeer games of, oh, well, give me Josh Jacobs over Saquon Barkley. That's something that can go horrifically wrong for you. Right. Like trading away Saquon Barkley, even if it's 99.4 cents on the dollar right now, and not doing it the right way. We talked about that a few weeks ago. Those are the type of things that can really change the trajectory of your Dynasty team, is what I'll say. So even though he had, guess what? Barry Sanders has some horrible games, just like the stat lines we saw. I remember watching them, but you hold your breath every carry, and that's what you do with Barkley. Every time he touches the ball or could touch the ball, you go, what could this be? And not every running back you feel that way about in the NFL. So that's the one thing I would say, and why it does need to be start at running back 3 in this discussion. It's a 2.5 age difference, but Ezekiel Elliott, I mean, he's right in his prime. He's on a great offense. He's done it every single year. It's not like he's 27. So I would still have Zeke higher. I do get the discussion point if you want more prime years, but I think you also need to be careful about how much is 1 age year worth, if you are talking about a different level or plane of player, let's say.
Yeah. And so that's, I mean, the fact that I think we're having this conversation is just a different conversation that's going on in terms of Josh Jacobs. And we have been sort of on this fringe of his value as opposed to a much more negative one. So I do think, I mean, if there's a takeaway from this conversation, we can, the age versus production versus career resume to date, that is a debate that will be had for players until Dynasty ceases to exist, right? That's an all-time debate. What I think is important of a takeaway action item is that I think Josh Jacobs is clearly a top 5 running back, and he clearly is 4 for me. I could see an argument with Kamara up there as well. Now that they get him locked in, right? That was part of the reason I had him lower. And I actually bumped up Dalvin Cook as well, not into the Josh Jacobs tier, but I bumped him up as well based on the news of the extension. So, I mean, those, between him and Kamara, I have him above Kamara. So, I mean, but I think that's the level that he belongs in, much more than in the, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Jonathan Taylor, Miles Sanders range of the position where he was earlier in the offseason.
Let me ask you this, projecting ahead. What does Jonathan Taylor have to do this year to make his mark on, hey, I should be running back 4, or 3, or whatever? Like, is there something he can do? I mean, now let's say within the scope of we are team optimism, but like, let's not say, he's got to break a record. He's got to break the rookie total yard. I mean, a lot of things are in play for him. That's a really good offensive line. And now, and I saw some promise of the passing game, but I think they're going to rein Phillip Rivers in. We saw 2 or 3 throws. It's like, man, you cannot make that throw. And he made them, and 2 of them were picks. And it's like, you got to rewind. You're not 28 anymore. You're not Jimmy Garoppolo currently of making throws that just, you think in your head it's going to turn out perfectly, and it's a horrific mistake. So they should be centering on the run game a lot. But what do you think? What does Taylor have to do? And could the answer be nothing, because he wasn't a round 1 pick like Jacobs, like Zeke, etc. But he would be younger than both of those guys.
I think that matters. I think draft pedigree matters. I don't think it matters as much to the market. So you could see the market doing things. If, for example, if Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor finish with the exact same amount of points this year, the exact same finish, I would guess that Taylor would be higher than Josh Jacobs. That would be my guess, that what the market would do. That's there's debate there about whether that should be the case, but I think that's the reality. I think he has he's just a more popular player. People feel more strongly towards him than Jacobs. That's the impression that I get. As I said before, Jacobs is a platinum standard, and you and I can like Jonathan Taylor, and he's trending in a very good direction right now. But the resume on Jacobs right now is as good as you can get from like this early in their career. Like this
mid to high running back 2 season, and then this one, a good amount better.
Yeah, and you look at the density of the hits, right? One of the things that I looked at in terms of, I just looked at what you get from basically the Josh Jacobs hit cohort, which is first round rookies that hit in year one versus guys that haven't hit, right? So versus incoming rookies, right? So basically the Josh Jacobs and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, that debate, it's so significantly tilted in Josh Jacobs's favor. I mean, that's about over the course of the next 3 seasons. So from Josh Jacobs' sophomore through his 4th season and Clyde Edwards-Helaire's first through 3rd season, on average, the Jacobs cohort outproduces the rookie by about a win, right? So that's a big deal. And when you sort of take it down another pedigree step to Taylor, right? We could think that he deserved to be a first round draft pick. He wasn't. So you sort of have to start from that perspective. We can like him as a 2nd round guy, but he doesn't fit in the Jacobs trajectory, at least in my mind at this point. Now, could things change? Certainly. But again, I am very high on Jonathan Taylor as well. He was my highest rookie. I just think that this is a good debate to have, right? I mean, this is 4 or 5 years ago.
These are good problems. Yeah.
Yeah. We're
flush with 21 to 25-year-old running backs that are productive and have pedigree and have strong overall profiles.
Right. 2020 has been bad for a lot of reasons. The running back depth is not one of those reasons, right? That's been a positive thing that we've had. So that's I think the big thing. Can I ask you a question? You mentioned earlier about Philadelphia and Reagor. Is Carson Wentz good?
Well, I was actually going to spin it to you. I was going to say, is the Eagles' offensive line good? Well, that's rhetorical because we know that answer. Well, yeah, I think it's going to be interesting, though, to see which part of the equation was more correct from week 1. Is it the first round laden Chase Young infused Washington pass rush? Or, I mean, again, the answer is probably a degree of both. And then just how bad the Eagles, potentially shifting the entire offensive look they have good weapons around them, when all healthy. And yet, is that going to collapse the card TP that they're, the card tower that they're building? Yeah. I mean, Carson Wentz, he, 2 more games, he'll be active if he continues to get banged around like he did in week 1. So I think it's a combination of both. I think Washington's rush is going to be able to wreck some teams. Now, the teams with a good offensive line, with a quarterback that gets the ball out on time, probably less effect. And the Eagles had neither of those things, and you just saw it collapse in the second half. It was pretty painful to watch.
Yeah, he takes 8 sacks. I was looking at some of the next gen numbers for him. He was high in terms of time to throw. So that's, if the pass rush is bearing down, you have to make an adjustment. That's something that he has not done well in his career. The completion percentage compared to expected completion percentage. Again, I don't like completion percentage because it's like batting average in baseball, but when you actually compare it to what it was expected, right? That gives you
keep checking it down. You can have a high one.
Yeah, you can have a high one, but comes with a very high expected number. His expected on his throws was 67.5%. His actual completion percentage, 57.1. So more than 10 percentage points worse than expectation. So, and
again, he had 2 long touchdowns, potential to Jalen Reagor with better throws or quasi accurate throws that didn't happen. Yeah, it was not a good game for him at all. And I wanted to ask you something else about the Eagles. And let's face it, they were without Miles Sanders. Let's put this hodgepodge together run game wise. So they probably felt like they couldn't lean on that as well. But something that I've said in different terms, and I think it could turn into the production side as well this year. And this was after seeing, I think it was Dallas Goedert in his first year, of saying, I think if you just, stack them up, I said, I think Dallas Goedert's a better player than Zach Ertz. I think there's more receiving potential here. And obviously he's got a sturdy edge after week 1, but do you think this is a setting where it's just, he was like a top 12 adjusted points per game guy last year, and that's with Ertz getting a ton of work, getting a ton of production, and yet it still went through 2 tight ends largely. We'll see with Jalen Reagor what he can add But I mean, Goddard being the tight end one on this team, is that like a hot takey sort of statement for folks that have been watching Goddard over the past couple years? And Ertz is a good player, but you wouldn't call him a transcendent talent that, Tony Gonzalez like or Antonio Gates like, of like, that you would expect him to be productive to 34, 35 plus years old.
There's news this week that Ertz is not happy with his contract, and sort of what that could bring, and is that set up a trade, right? I mean, that's that. I saw a Philly beat writer today, mention that online. So that'll be interesting to watch. Goddard, the example between these two guys is pretty wild, because Goddard posts a tight end one number this week.
Overall.
Overall. But when you sort of look at the start rate for them, he was only started in about a third of leagues. And so the average, what's interesting about this is the average Ertz owner is in a better spot right now than the average Goddard owner, because 2 out of 3 of the Goddard owners had him on the bench. Ertz, you collected all of that. And in terms of WARP, Ertz was the better guy. Now, if you started Goddard, if you were in the minority of people that started Goddard, you're ahead, but most of the market had him on the bench. So I think that's an interesting one.
Well, here's the other interesting thing, and I'm speaking to the exact audience. I mean, so you're going to nod as I'm saying it, but for listeners, so that's the fun thing about start rate, is that, again, it's empty because it's on the bench. So other than market value or maybe confidence in a future week, it provides you nothing, because you wasted it. Now, they were low start rate for probably a reason, but a high start rate, that doesn't pan out, it hurts you more. But the interesting thing is, we make spreadsheets and get all geeky about this stuff, is that, so then you start looking at what happens the next week. The low start rate guy, that all of a sudden he's going to jump up. I mean, now, unless it was a truly rogue performance from some wide receiver 5 that got loose for 2 touchdowns or whatever, or, a backup running back and the starter's coming back the next week, whatever it is, that it's interesting if Goddard goes from 30% to, just spitballing, to 65% this week, now it's when it counts. This is the week that actually matters, not last week about Dallas Goedert, unless you traded him, unless now you feel more confident. So if it jumps up to 65 and he puts up a 7, now everyone's going to say, I hate Dallas Goedert, he's never starting for me again. These are sort of the semantics you play in your head of, like, you play these reindeer games, and it's like there's so much human factor to setting lineups, right? I mean, we would honestly, and I'm trying to really get my human element out of it, per se, where, if I really don't have a strong take, or we only have a couple lineup decisions, let's be fair, right, on your whole roster. I mean, a lot of 4 or 5 of your 7 or 8 spots are just going to be declared. Like, these are the guys I'm starting, unless something happens. And then the last ones, though, I mean, like, for example, Jonathan Taylor versus Cam Akers. I'm just going to pick one out of the air, but I mean, they were notably different in start rate. And so if they were close in projections, you didn't have a strong take. I mean, and this is selective bias, but this is the one I can think of, that Taylor was the right side. Even if that injury didn't occur, I still think he would have had more points. So again, and they were about 20% off in terms of their start rate. Now, if it's 6% different, I mean, you're stuck, and you got to go through a different methodology, I think. But when you see a divide like that, that's where, again, you can use what's the consensus of thousands of fantasy leagues, redraft, dynasty, and otherwise. What are they all doing? And if I'm on the other side, either I'm playing the smartest man in the universe theory, or then I have some insider info, or maybe I need to take a step back and just go, you know what? I mean, there's a lot of people making a lot of decisions, and they're on the other side of maybe what I want to do or what I think I should do.
Yeah, and there's certainly times to reject the market, right? Like there's players all the time that we say they're at ADP that's just where we don't feel whether good or bad. This is a particular time where I think, and I've done research on the impact of it too. And it like you said, it reflects a lot of things, right? It reflects our rankings, it reflects
analyst rankings, right? Because that's who a lot of people follow. So and so said to start so and so, and all of a sudden now they're in their lineup. You know, and that's reflected in that percentage that grows and grows by sample.
Absolutely. So it has been something, and each year there's something that I make a specific point of getting better at, and lineup setting is one of the two things I'm doing this year in terms of really focusing and trying to get better at doing, and using start rate is really one of the things ultimately that I'm incorporating more, because we know the power of it, right? We know that it is predictive. We know that it is, that is correlated, right? And so it's a helpful metric. I'm not going to say that we're just going to, rank them by that, but ultimately there's a lot of information reflected in those, and it's very helpful. So especially late in the week, if you're looking Saturday or Sunday morning, something like that, it's going to be the best time then. It's like the betting line of a game, right? That's ultimately what it ends up looking like. So
you can start there and then adjust from that. And I know, Footballguys and others, they do that throughout, where it's like you start there. It's almost like an implied team total. And that's a driver for things like defensive sit starts or kickers, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I don't know if I got I had you on the hot seat. I don't know if you got the answer, if you ever directly answered whether Carson Wentz was good or not.
Well, it wasn't a good look for him, and I'm team Carson Wentz of this room, but also I would say the general Dynasty marketplace. That I think he's had a raw deal in general. I do think he holds the ball too long, but I think he's a dynamic playmaker. We've seen already that he has top 8 potential any given season. Now this year is going to test that, because he's got a deep threat, but you got to hit it for one, and number two, that offensive line. We know. I mean, let's ask Daniel Jones. Let's ask two or three other quarterbacks in the NFL. They're going to have a tough time. Bar none, unless you're a pure runner and you can get away, and now you're going to have rushing upside. You're going to have a tough time, and the Eagles are one of those. So I wouldn't put great odds that he plays 16. I mean, that's been a good bet. I mean, his whole career, but I mean, again, and I'll say another one just because it includes it in that durability quarterback conversation. So yes, I think Carson Wentz is good. Does that mean he's going to finish top 10 this year or play almost every game for the rest of the season? No. I will say this. If I was a Lamar Jackson owner, I would be pretty concerned. He gets I don't know. Again, I can't think back to every single rep he had last year, week 1. And this was a easy win for them. He got banged around. He takes hits. He takes running back type hits, because why? He gets outside of the pocket. He starts running like a run. He said no to running straight out of bounds after he actually got yards and a nice scramble. He says no to that. He sticks his foot in the ground. He goes inside. There is no way any part of the coaching staff says to do that. And it's his instinct. He plays playground ball. He's held up so far in his career. I'll just say this. RG3 would be on my short list for Superflex and premium format owns, because I just don't. He either is part robot if he holds up like how he plays, or it's just a matter of time. I mean, it's a matter of time, and who knows how severe he pops up after these hits, and it's like you get driven to the ground by a guy significantly bigger than you, and he took big shots that I didn't see. Kyler Murray he is the opposite. Russell Wilson is the opposite. They take smart shots, and really they don't take shots because they slide. They proactively slide. I think someone put out Kyler Murray had he had 13 runs and 12 of them he slid with basically no contact. And one of them he got tackled kind of loosely from this, like it wasn't a shot. And Lamar Jackson, by my count, it was more than 5. Direct, legit tackle shots. I don't. How do you do that for 16? I don't. Anyway, so he is absolutely Mr. High Variance, because he's going to be dynamic. And then what if he's not? What if he's not in terms of availability, but what if they accrue over time? That was just one sort of macro point when I was watching the Ravens game as they were drubbing the Browns. But if you wanted to take a negative or concerning point from an overtly positive result.
Yeah, I'm with you on that.
One other offense I wanted to bring up is Green Bay Packers. So Aaron Rodgers, I mean, concerns with the Vikings secondary? Sure. Were they out without one of their main pass rushers? Yes. But I mean, agenda. I mean, it seems like if he actually has Alan Lazard and Marquez Valdez-Scantling some solutions or some contributors, which both of them had really quality games, almost everybody did except for the tight ends. If he actually has those two guys as deep and intermediate threats respectively, in addition to Devontae Adams and all the running backs that can play, I mean, Aaron Rodgers, and again, I don't know why we have to prop this guy up. He has like 49 touchdowns, 5 interceptions over the past 2 years. Let's quibble about the touchdown number. He's one of the best ever. And yet it seems like no one was expecting him to be a top 3-4 option this year, and it's firmly in play.
Well, how about that Rodgers Adams stack, right? I mean, that was just a huge week. I'll say this: don't make Aaron Rodgers mad, because he will just like vindictively try and spite you, which as a coach, as a management tactic, listen, if you're going to get the best out of your players, like sometimes you have to coddle people, sometimes you have to make them mad. And they have it doesn't look like that the drafting of Jordan Love made him all that happy, which if you own him in fantasy is a pretty good feeling, because he is the player that will just vindictively throw for 55 touchdowns, right? I mean, that's just sort of his personality. And as a dynasty owner of him, as a dynasty GM who has him rostered, I like it. So
I got him for a third rounder, Jordan. I had no starting quarterback a week before the season. I held out trying to think I would have somebody, waiver wire, whatever, doing it as cheap as possible. I wanted to give 2/4 for Phillip Rivers for a guy that had 4 starting quarterbacks. I didn't give a third. He countered with a third. I wouldn't take it. And then his counter, because he really wanted a 3rd round pick, Jordan, is I got Aaron Rodgers for a third instead of Phillip Rivers for 2/4. And I was like, okay, all right, sir. And but I remember
Aaron, why don't you?
Okay. You got that later, ideally later third out of me. You got it. Let's see how that turns out from a team that has 4 versus a team that has none. And they tried to leverage it. We worked that trade for like 3 months. Persistence pays. But how about Aaron Rodgers going in 5th, 6th round of startup drafts in Superflex? I remember that specifically. We talked about it. It's like, this is either absurd or the beginning of the end. And it's one game. We'll see about the rest of the season, but right now it looks absurd.
Yeah. It's hey, you and I had a conversation about this specifically, and it was like, hey, let's just bet on the guy that's, the Hall of Famer, right? The first ballot Hall of Famer, to just keep doing that instead of,
right. That's like Breeze going in round 10, Brady in round 12 of Superflex drafts. You're like, well, this is on the billboard of wide await.
Right.
Certainly. Yeah. Any final thoughts about this week? I mean, again, this is I always say in broadcasting or podcasting or whatever, I mean, this is the easiest week to have content. The NFL is back. Everything is anew. We had no preseason. There's endless. I mean, you should be able to record 15 hours of podcasting or radio or whatever without any problem, and not even mentioning other sports, etc. But whether it's trading, something we didn't cover, which is almost everything, going into week 2, what are some of the things on your mind that we did not hit?
I guess I'll just hit injuries quickly. And we cover plenty of this in other shows, but the Michael Thomas thing looks like it's going to be week to week with his high ankle sprain. So that's a concern to watch for. George Kittle with a sprained knee. So that's to watch for as well. What's the status of Miles Sanders? Le'Veon Bell just went on IR. Marlon Mack's obviously out for the year. James Conner, right? There's a lot of these moving situations. I'll say this, and I did a trade today, which was James Robinson for a future second. I wasn't contending. James Robinson wasn't going to help me. It's a orphan team that I adopted. It's not ready for prime time. I'll get the pick, right? I think now's a really good time when you have all of these injuries to take questionable profiles, non-durable profiles, turn them into something better, right? This is the time to do that. There's a lot of injuries out there. There's a lot of people that are going to be in need of instant production. Feed that need would be, I think, the big takeaway heading into week 2.
Feed the beast. Yes. And what I always say is I love in-season dynasty trading because there's no static market. The static market is from right now until that team kicks off this week, because a trade will look absurd one way or another. And and that's why a lot of people, they revoke trades, going into Sunday, because that trade might look ridiculous if a guy gets hurt, or if again, what if a small range of outcome occurs, positively or negatively in that week. All of a sudden the negotiation goes differently, and maybe the team that said no, the other side would say no the next week. So and what I love is people cannot rely on ADP or startup drafts or any of these ancillary type means, because the market moves too quickly. I mean, by the time you were to set it for this week, what day would it be? And then it's irrelevant. You got to do it all over again next week. So that's what I love. And like you mentioned, chasing production, that at running back especially, it can happen in premium formats at other positions too. But the opportunity wagon that comes door to door and comes knocking, do you want Girl Scout cookies, and all of a sudden they, James Robinson tastes so sweet. They saw that he got a lot of touches, and it was actually a game that they had some positive game script, which may not happen for the next 2 months. You never know. And so there's so many things that go into it, and you can cash out, like you said, on non-durable profiles. But it really is hard. It's more difficult to do it in February, in July, because part of it for me is a static nature of things, that there's not anything moving. Here, things are moving, and quickly. Everything just moved. Some of these players, it's like wildly different from a week ago. And again, those could be false positives. They could be positive, false negative, etc. So, but the fact is that everyone sort of has a take that's evolving every single week based on more and more sample, which I think is great. But it also leads to now more opportunities in dynasty trading. I had a number of people, Twitter, otherwise, that start saying things like, man, I haven't made a dynasty trade in 6 weeks, kind of leading up to the season. It's like, well, what do you expect? I mean, you built your team over the course of the offseason or multiple seasons. Here you are. You drafted the guys you wanted in the rookie draft, and you made some trades during your rookie draft. You've already shopped probably till you drop all your potential flip players, at least guys that you could sell for what you wanted. So what else is there to do? Nothing. Wait for the season. Good job. Job well done. You get a participation trophy. But these people that think you got to make a trade every week, or you're not being a good dynasty GM, there's parts of the calendar that are pretty static, and frankly, surprised to get deals done is what I would say. All right. Do want to remind you, this is episode 21 of the Football Guys Dynasty Show. Subscribe, rate, and review all of the podcasting platforms for the Football Guys Audible channel. You can see us over on YouTube, and sign up for that Football Guys daily email update. It's coming out earlier in the evenings. That's been consistent from Joe Bryan. It's all the news you need. Don't miss something, whether it's setting your waiver wire, a trade. We always talk a savvy strategy. If you get a trade that you're thinking of doing, do a quick search. Quick Twitter search, a quick online search, see if there's any news, something that you're missing, just to make sure that you have all the information you need. And that's what the Football Guys daily email update is going to provide to you, as well as breaking news, which I would say you probably average one of those, if not two of those every week, changing. And one thing I would point on the Football Guys site would be, again, if you haven't synced your leagues over at my Football Guys, that's something you have to do. It saves you tons of time every week, even if you're only in 3 or 4 leagues. The other thing is the game day expectations, all of the injury news from Gene Bramall, where you're getting practice reports, you're getting everything in one concise document over the course of the week that's updated. But then also, as you get into the weekend, the Sunday morning update, all of those things are just integral. For example, I had a situation where, I go into a bubble, at 1:00 on Sunday. I wait, I watch the condensed games, but yet, Brandon Ayuk was someone that I rolled out in one of my leagues, and I pulled him back because he ended up being a late scratch. So it really takes being plugged in so that you have all the information you have to make the best decision possible. And again, sign up at footballguys.com/free. So, in this episode, we discussed a ton from week 1, especially the running back position, the changing landscape of player value in Dynasty. I am Chad Parsons. He is Jordan McNamara. And until next time, good luck in your Dynasty leagues.